It's late. The world outside is quiet, but your mind is loud. You lie in bed, phone in hand, scrolling, not even sure what you're looking for anymore. Maybe it's a photo, a message, a face that sparks something, anything. Your body feels restless, your heart oddly numb. You tell yourself it's just desire, just a need for release. It's natural, right? Everyone does it. One more swipe, one more scroll, one more fantasy. But somewhere, buried beneath the surface, a different voice begins to whisper. Voice you've spent a long time ignoring. What if this isn't lust? What if this is loneliness wearing a mask? You see, we've been taught to believe that craving is physical, that late-night urges are just about sex. But that's a half-truth, the kind that feels easier to accept than the full one, because the full truth is heavier. It says, this hunger, this aching need that keeps you up at night, isn't just in your body, it's in your soul. And most of us are terrified to admit that, because to admit it would mean something is missing, that something inside us has gone quiet for too long. And instead of sitting with that silence, we fill it with bodies, with images, with dopamine, with distraction. We say we're chasing pleasure, but really, we're running. Running from boredom, from isolation, from the ache of being unseen. And in that running, we've built a culture that confuses stimulation with connection. What no one tells you is this: lust, in its rawest form, isn't about sex, it's about absence, the kind you can't name. The kind that doesn't go away after release. The kind that returns the moment the screen goes dark. Carl Jung saw this long before society was ready to listen. He wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And that's what we're doing. Night after night, we are scrolling past ourselves, swiping past our pain, clicking away from presence. Lust is not your enemy, it's a messenger. A signal flare from your inner world, trying to say, something in here has gone unfelt for too long. You say you want her, that stranger on the screen, that body in your memory, that fantasy you replay like a lullaby. But do you really want her? Or do you want what she represents? To be seen, to be held, to feel alive again. Lust is the language your disconnection has learned to speak. It's loud, it's immediate. It tricks you into thinking you've touched something real. But the truth is, you haven't even touched yourself, not the way you need to. This isn't about shame. This isn't about repression. This is about waking up. Waking up to the fact that what you're really craving isn't sex. It's intimacy. It's presence. It's purpose. And most of all, it's you. The version of you that still believes in love, in meaning, in being felt, not just seen, in being chosen, not just clicked on. But we've stopped asking the deeper questions. We've learned to settle for surface pleasures because the deeper ones take courage. They take patience. They take silence. And silence is uncomfortable. So we trade depth for distraction. We tell ourselves it's harmless, but slowly it starts to erode something. Not just our sense of others, but our sense of self. So here's where the conversation really begins. Not with judgment, not with morality, but with curiosity. What is this craving trying to show you about yourself? What have you lost touch with? Who were you before the scrolling started? And most importantly, are you willing to stop running, just long enough to find out? This isn't a video about quitting porn. It's not a sermon about lust. It's an invitation to come home, to return to the part of yourself that's been whispering in the background for years, the part that's tired of pretending it's okay to feel empty, the part that knows you weren't made to consume love, you were made to embody it. So stay, just for a little while. Stay with the silence, stay with the ache, because if you listen closely, you might just hear something beautiful rising from beneath the hunger, the sound of your own soul saying, "I'm still here." And maybe, just maybe, that's where everything starts to change. Desire has been demonized, idolized, moralized, and misunderstood. It's been labeled as dangerous, sinful, addictive, something to be controlled or conquered. But what if we've been asking the wrong questions all along? What if desire is not the problem, but a messenger? What if the late-night craving, the fantasy you return to, the fire that stirs in your gut at the sight of a stranger, it's not about lust at all? What if it's your soul trying to get your attention? We often treat lust like a glitch in the system, something that pulls us away from who we want to be. But Carl Jung didn't see it that way. For him, the impulses we fear most aren't accidents. They are signals, vital, urgent, coded messages from the unconscious. When you feel that surge of desire, especially the irrational kind that seems to erupt out of nowhere, it's not just biology. It's psychology. It's spirituality. It's your inner world speaking in its native language. Think about it. Why does desire often arise not just in times of excitement, but in moments of emotional drought? When you're tired, when you're lonely, when you feel stuck, disconnected, uninspired. That's not coincidence. That's pattern, and patterns have meaning. Lust often arrives when we've drifted too far from ourselves. It becomes the quick, reactive answer to a deeper, unspoken question. What am I missing? This is why lust doesn't satisfy. Because the thing you're reaching for isn't the thing you truly need. The hit of dopamine, the momentary pleasure, it doesn't address the ache beneath it. It only quiets it for a little while. Then it returns, stronger, louder, more insistent. And every time you respond to the surface craving without asking what's beneath it, you train yourself to ignore the very thing you're most hungry for. You tell yourself it's just about sex, just about beauty, just about chemistry. But if you really slow down, if you really pay attention, you'll notice something deeper. Desire often carries with it a sense of mourning, a hint of sadness, as if you're not just chasing someone, you're grieving something, a lost part of yourself, a forgotten need, an abandoned truth. This is why it hurts. Not because desire is bad, but because it's sacred. Because buried inside it is something holy. You're longing to feel alive again, to feel connected, to feel whole. But in a world obsessed with speed and surfaces, we've lost the patience for depth. So we reach for what's easy: images, stimulation, friction. And then we wonder why we still feel empty afterward. The truth is, desire isn't shallow. We are. Or rather, we've been taught to be. We've been conditioned to consume rather than contemplate, to chase rather than feel, to react rather than reflect. But if you sit with desire long enough without feeding it, without judging it, it starts to change shape. It softens. It speaks. It shows you what's really going on inside. Maybe that ache in your chest isn't about needing someone new. Maybe it's about needing to grieve the version of you that was never loved properly. Maybe the craving isn't about orgasm. Maybe it's about connection. Real, raw, vulnerable connection. The kind that holds space for your whole being, not just your body. Carl Jung knew that our most powerful impulses often disguise our deepest truths. He didn't see lust as something to repress. He saw it as an invitation, an opportunity, a path inward. Because behind every irrational craving is a part of you that's still trying to be seen, heard, felt. The part of you that's tired of performing, tired of pretending, tired of being strong. So instead of asking, "Why do I keep wanting this?" ask, "What is this desire pointing me toward?" You may discover it's not about her curves or his smile, or that one night you can't stop replaying. It's about the part of you that longs to be chosen without conditions. The part that wants to be known beyond what you can offer. The part that still believes intimacy is possible without performance. This shift in perspective doesn't make desire disappear. It makes it deeper, more honest, less reactive. You stop chasing people and start listening to your inner world. You stop escaping and start inquiring. Desire becomes less about consumption and more about clarity. It becomes less of a burden and more of a compass. And yes, this can be uncomfortable, because it means feeling things you've buried. It means sitting with the silence you've been running from. It means noticing how often you've mistaken distraction for nourishment. But there is great power in that discomfort. Because what you can feel, you can heal. What you can witness, you can transform. Lust is not your enemy. It's your teacher. And like any good teacher, it will keep showing up until you've learned what it's trying to say. Until you stop blaming yourself for having cravings and start understanding them as calls for reconnection with your body, with your soul, with the parts of you that got left behind somewhere along the way. This is the true invitation of desire, not to be tamed, but to be translated, not to be feared, but to be faced, not to be indulged blindly, but explored consciously. When you treat your desire as a doorway instead of a detour, everything changes. You start to see beauty not just in others, but in yourself. You start to feel presence instead of pressure. You begin to return to the sacred intelligence of your own longing. Because beneath every impulse there is information. And beneath every craving, there is a question. Are you willing to listen? Are you willing to go beyond the scroll, the screen, the secondhand satisfaction and face the silence that holds your truth? Desire, at its deepest level, is not about escape, it's about expression. It's your soul saying, I'm still here, I still want to be felt, I still believe in love, and maybe, just maybe, I'm not asking you to run after someone, I'm asking you to finally turn toward me. That's where healing begins. Not in resistance, not in indulgence, but in presence. In the willingness to feel the fire without being burned by it. To let it warm you, instead of consume you. And to ask, in the quiet that follows, what am I truly longing for? There's a part of you that has always watched from the sidelines. A quiet observer, pushed into the background, edited out of the version of yourself you perform for the world. It carries everything you weren't allowed to express. Your pain, your tenderness, your longing, your shame. Carl Jung called this part of you the shadow. Not because it's evil or dark, but because it lives in the dark, unseen, repressed, and exiled from the light of your conscious identity. And yet, the shadow never disappears. It waits. It waits in silence, in craving, in your compulsions, in the moments you feel least like yourself, but most controlled by something within you that you don't fully understand. When you feel pulled towards something irrational, when you sabotage something good, when you obsess over someone who doesn't deserve your attention, that's the shadow. When you can't stop returning to that website, that memory, that fantasy that leaves you emptier than before, that's the shadow acting through you. Not because it's malicious, but because it's the only way it knows how to ask for your attention. You see, the shadow doesn't speak in words. It speaks in symptoms, in habits, in impulses, in that invisible hunger that flares up when you're alone, in that strange grief that follows pleasure, in that deep tiredness in your chest, even when everything around you looks fine. Jung believed that people will do anything to avoid facing their own soul, even if it means destroying their peace, their relationships, or their future. That might sound dramatic, but look closer. How many times have you told yourself you'd stop reaching out to someone who hurt you? Stop falling into the same late-night loops of craving and regret. Stop chasing validation in the form of empty attention, but you didn't? Not because you're weak, but because there's a deeper truth behind the behavior, one you haven't made conscious yet. The shadow isn't just the bad or dark within you. It's also the unloved, the unseen, the unheard. It is made up of all the parts of you that were not accepted when you were younger. Sensitivity, vulnerability, need, desire for affection. When those parts were met with rejection, ridicule, or indifference, you learned to exile them. You became who you thought you needed to be in order to survive, to be loved, to feel safe. And everything else? You buried it. That burial is what creates the shadow. But here's the tragedy. The parts you buried didn't die. They just went underground. And now, they show up in distorted forms. They show up as lust you can't explain, as anger that turns inward, as depression that doesn't have a name, as addiction to stimulation because silence has become unbearable. The shadow becomes your phantom limb, an invisible force that affects every choice, every relationship, every night you lie awake wondering, why do I feel so disconnected? Jung didn't judge the shadow. He revered it. He knew that whatever you repress doesn't just disappear, it grows stronger in the dark. And if you don't make it conscious, it will control you from behind the scenes. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung wrote, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Think about that. What if your repeated mistakes, your seemingly random desires, your inability to sit in peace with yourself at night? What if none of it is random? What if it's your shadow crying out to be seen? The real danger of unchecked desire isn't moral, it's psychological. When you act on lust without understanding it, you're not satisfying the shadow, you're strengthening it. Every unconscious indulgence becomes reinforcement. The cycle deepens, and soon you don't just crave the stimulation, you need it. Not because you love it, but because you've become afraid of what might surface in its absence. The shadow feeds on avoidance, but it transforms through attention. When you begin to turn toward your cravings, not with shame but with curiosity, you start to reclaim your power. You begin to see the desire not as a monster to conquer, but as a message to decode. You realize, I'm not actually craving sex. I'm craving presence. I'm not looking for friction. I'm looking for home. And I've spent so long outside of myself. No wonder I keep trying to find comfort in places that can't hold me. Jung's work wasn't about repression. It was about integration. He believed that healing comes not from killing the shadow, but from meeting it, sitting with it, learning from it. The more you deny it, the more control it has. But the more you embrace it with compassion, the more it softens. The more it becomes your ally, not your enemy. But integration is not a quick fix. It is not about perfection. It is about presence. It begins in small, terrifying moments. The moment you feel the urge to open a browser and instead sit in the discomfort. The moment you want to text someone for validation and instead breathe into the ache of feeling unseen. The moment you choose to write about your feelings instead of running from them. These are the moments where you begin to break the cycle. Not by force, but by facing what's real. The shadow is seductive not because it's sexy, but because it offers the illusion of control. It says, you can have this now, you can feel something now. But what it really gives you is a mask that temporarily hides the loneliness underneath. And every time you put that mask on, you lose a little more contact with who you really are. To face the shadow is to remove the mask, to sit with the discomfort of being unguarded, to ask, what am I really afraid of feeling? What memory, what belief, what story have I pushed away because I didn't know how to hold it? And once you begin asking those questions, you step into a different kind of power. The kind that comes not from dominance over your urges, but from deep understanding of where they come from. The kind of power that says, I don't need to run anymore. I'm not afraid of what I feel. I trust that every part of me, even the parts I've hidden, deserve to be seen, heard, loved. This is the work of wholeness, of becoming one again, of ending the inner civil war between who you are and who you think you should be. Lust is not the problem. The disconnection beneath it is. And once you reconnect, once you meet the shadow, not with fear, but with grace, something changes. The craving loses its edge. The silence becomes bearable. And for the first time, maybe in a long time, you begin to feel like yourself again. Because the self you've been avoiding, the soft one, the tender one, the hurting one, is not your weakness. It is your gateway to truth. And when you bring that part home, the shadow no longer controls you. It walks beside you. And that, Jung believed, is the beginning of healing, not perfection, not purity, but integration. The return to your whole, undivided self. The self that no longer needs to chase shadows because it has remembered the light within. There's a moment, right before desire takes hold, that you often overlook. It's quiet, subtle, fleeting. A look, a laugh, a photo, a memory. Something touches you not just visually, but energetically. You feel drawn, pulled towards someone. But if you paused right there before the fantasy begins, Before your mind turns it into a story, you might notice that what you're actually reacting to isn't her at all. It's a reflection of something within yourself that you've forgotten how to feel. This is one of Carl Jung's most powerful insights. When we fall into deep attraction, especially sudden, intense, irrational desire, we are not just reacting to the other person, we are projecting onto them. We are placing our unmet needs, our lost dreams, our unintegrated emotions onto another human being and mistaking the echo for the source. We think it's about them, but it's really about us. Jung called this projection of the inner feminine onto an external figure, anima projection. For men, the anima is the unconscious feminine side of the psyche, part that governs emotion, sensitivity, intuition, creativity, vulnerability. Most men, especially in emotionally repressive environments, grow up disconnected from this inner feminine. They are taught to value strength, logic, control. They are taught that softness is weakness, that emotion is a problem, that vulnerability is dangerous. And so, the anima is pushed into the unconscious, forgotten, rejected, starved. But what is repressed within will always seek expression without. And so the anima begins to surface not as a conscious experience of emotion, but as fascination, infatuation, and intense longing for women who carry the energy the man has lost contact with. He doesn't know this consciously. All he knows is that she feels like magic. She awakens something. She makes him feel alive, emotional, tender, vulnerable things he hasn't felt in years. He calls it lust. He calls it chemistry. But it's actually a reunion with himself, misinterpreted as an obsession with her. This is why your desire often hurts, why it feels so irrational, so all-consuming, and so hollow afterward. Because you're not really chasing sex. You're chasing the emotional qualities she represents. Her softness reminds you of your own lost sensitivity. Her beauty awakens your forgotten awe. Her presence mirrors your own hidden longing to be seen, to be held, to be touched not physically, but spiritually. And so you project. You pour the unmet parts of your soul into a stranger. You assign her the role of savior. Not intentionally. It happens beneath awareness. You think, if I could just have her, I'd be okay. But what you're really saying is, if I could just feel again, I'd be okay. She's not the solution, she's the symbol. This is why desire becomes so heavy, so fraught, so easily distorted. Because it's carrying emotional weight it was never meant to hold. No one, no matter how beautiful or magnetic, can complete the parts of you that you've abandoned. And the more you expect her to, the more pressure you place on that fantasy. Eventually, it collapses either because she disappoints you, or because even after getting what you wanted, you still feel the ache. And this ache is the real story. It's the ache of emotional starvation, the ache of disconnection from the anima, from the part of you that once loved deeply, dreamed wildly, cried freely, created passionately, the part that didn't care about appearances or control, but just wanted to feel real. That part was never wrong, it was never weak, it was just inconvenient, and so it was silenced. But now, she returns, not as a memory, but as projection, as obsession, as lust. Not because you're broken, but because your soul is trying to bring her back, to reawaken her, to integrate her. And you think you need Herthe woman on the screen, the girl from the past, the stranger you barely know, but what you actually need is to remember yourself. This is not romanticism. This is psychology. The anima isn't just an idea. It's a living, breathing force within you. When disconnected, she hijacks your desires, distorts your relationships, and confuses physical longing with emotional hunger. But when integrated, she becomes your guide, your compass, your source of inner wisdom. Your creativity, your compassion, your capacity to love all come from her. This is why no amount of sex will fill the void. No amount of scrolling, fantasizing, chasing, conquering will bring you home. Because the home you're looking for isn't in her body. It's in your own forgotten inner world. You're not chasing her, you're chasing the part of you she reminds you of. And that part has been waiting a long time to be invited back in. So what do you do with this? First, you become aware. You stop calling it lust and start calling it a signal. You catch yourself in the moment of projection and ask, what quality does she represent for me? Is it softness, openness, mystery, emotional depth? What part of me does she awaken that I haven't touched in years? Then you sit with it. You stop feeding the fantasy and start feeding the feeling. You write, you meditate, you cry, you walk in silence. You let the emotions rise without rushing to fix them. You begin the slow process of reintegration, not through force, but through presence. Not by trying to kill your craving, but by learning what it's really asking for. And over time, the charge softens. The obsession dissolves. You start to see her not as salvation, but as a mirror, a teacher, a reflection. You begin to reclaim your inner feminine not by finding her out there, but by embodying her in here. Through creativity, through emotional honesty, through gentle awareness of your own wounds and needs. Jung believed that real transformation happens not by removing desire, but by understanding it. By bringing the unconscious into consciousness. By making the projection visible and re-owning what was once disowned. That's the task. That's the work. Not to chase her, but to trace her presence back to your own soul. And when you do, something changes. You stop falling for illusions. You stop needing someone to complete you. You stop turning women into gods or devils. You see them as they are whole, complex, human. And you see yourself the same way, no longer a man torn between craving and shame, but someone who has found the courage to meet himself fully. You still feel desire. But now, it's different. It's rooted, not frantic. It's spacious, not desperate. It becomes a bridge to intimacy, not a trap of projection, because you've met the source. You've returned to the well. And in doing so, you've made peace with the fire that once consumed you. The truth is, you never truly wanted her. You wanted what she awakened in you. And now that you've found it within yourself, you're free. Free to love, not from lack, but from overflow. Free to desire, not from need, but from presence. Free to be with Samo Neno as a savior or substitute, but as a partner in the great unfolding of your whole, integrated self. That is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, the reunion of masculine and feminine within. And it begins not by chasing someone outside of you, but by listening to the longing inside. The longing that says, I miss me. I want to come home. I want to feel again. That longing is sacred. That ache is holy. And every time it shows up disguised as lust, you now know it's not about her. It's about you. And the journey back to your lost self has already begun. It always starts the same way. A flicker, a spark, a wave of restlessness that whispers you need something. You don't name it right away. It creeps in subtly, disguised as boredom, stress, loneliness, or just another long night with nothing to hold on to. You pick up your phone, scroll past a few images, open a familiar tab, and before you realize it, you're already inside the maze. Again, this isn't just about desire anymore. It's about what happens when desire loses its direction, when it no longer connects you to your vitality, your creativity, your soul, but instead becomes a closed loop. Trigger, urge, action, relief, regret, repeat. You don't even think. It's automatic. Something triggers you, a memory, an image, an emotion you haven't faced, and suddenly you're no longer choosing, you're being pulled. Carl Jung called this psychic possession, a condition in which a complex, usually rooted in trauma or unconscious need, takes over the ego and acts through you. It feels like you. It sounds like your voice in your head. But it isn't you, not the conscious, present, whole version of you. It's a fragment, a reflex, a mechanism built, not for love or connection, but for escape. And here's what makes it so dangerous. It works, at least temporarily. The hit of dopamine, the distraction, the rush it soothes the surface. It silences the ache, the emptiness, the question you don't want to face, but only for a moment. Because afterward, the silence returns. Stronger, louder, heavier. You tell yourself it's harmless, just a release, just something to take the edge off. But over time, the loop starts to close in around you. You begin to feel its effects not just in your sexuality, but in your life. You lose motivation, you stop creating, you avoid people, you no longer engage in the things that once made you feel alive. Why? Because the fire that was meant to fuel your passion has been rerouted. It's being burned up in temporary release, instead of long-term transformation. This is the real cost. Not moral failure, not shame in the religious sense, but erosion, the slow decay of your vitality, your attention span, your depth. The more you feed the craving without consciousness, the more you wire your nervous system to seek intensity instead of intimacy. You teach yourself that emotional discomfort must be solved with stimulation. That longing must be silenced, not understood. That friction is more bearable than stillness. And eventually, you don't know how to sit still. You don't know how to be alone with your thoughts. You can't tolerate the ache in your chest. You've lost the muscle of being present with yourself. And so, the loop tightens. Not just physically, but neurologically, emotionally, spiritually. You've trained yourself to run from yourself, and now, even when you want to stay, something inside keeps pulling you away. You start craving more novelty, more intensity, more extremes, because the original dose no longer gives you the high it used to. This is how addiction begins, not just to substances, but to patterns. The pattern of escape, the pattern of turning away, the pattern of seeking life through things that cannot give it to you. Jung warned that when a man does not face the unconscious rules his life, and he calls it fate. That's what's happening in this loop. You believe this is who you are, that you're just someone who can't stop, that your desire owns you, that love is beyond your reach, that you're too far gone. But none of that is true. You're not addicted to lust. You're addicted to disconnection, and your soul is starving for what you've forgotten how to give yourself. Attention, honesty, presence. And the longer you stay in the loop, the more your inner world begins to fracture. You smile in public, but you feel empty inside. You perform well enough in your relationships, but you know something is missing. You long for intimacy, but you sabotage it the moment it gets too close. Why? Because real intimacy requires presence. And presence is painful when you've spent years avoiding your own heart. At first, you might not notice, but then you stop dreaming. You stop listening to music that moves you. You stop writing, painting, building, creating. Your mind feels foggy. Your chest feels heavy. And you begin to wonder what happened to the man you used to be. The one who cared. The one who felt things deeply. The one who believed in love, in depth, in soul. This is not your failure. This is the consequence of living in a loop that was never designed to fulfill you. And breaking it doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. It requires courage. The courage to feel without fixing, to sit without scrolling, to let the urge rise and say, I see you, I hear you, but I choose differently this time. You will fail. You will fall. The loop is strong, but every moment you stay present, just a little longer than before you weaken it. Every time you write instead of watching, walk instead of scrolling, breathe instead of reacting, you take back your power. Not because desire is wrong, but because you are no longer using it to run from yourself. You don't heal this pattern by fighting it. You heal it by understanding it. You ask, what am I really feeling? What triggered this wave? What have I been avoiding all day? And you answer with honesty, not judgment. You respond with presence, not performance. Eventually, something shifts. The loop loosens. The craving loses its grip. You start feeling again not just desire, but joy, creativity, grief, hope. You find that you don't need to chase stimulation to feel alive, because you've remembered how to live from within. Jung taught that the key to transformation is not control, but integration. The loop doesn't break because you suppress your desire. It breaks because you listen to it. You let it guide you back to the parts of yourself that are still waiting to be felt. The maze is not infinite. It only feels that way when you walk it blind. But once you bring light to the pattern, once you see the walls for what they are, you begin to find a way out. Step by step, moment by moment. Not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. Because in the end, you were never meant to live in a loop. You were meant to live in connection with your body, your soul, your truth. And every time you choose presence over escape, you reclaim that life. Not someday, but now. At some point, you realize the exit you've been searching for is not out there. It's not in her eyes. It's not in the next scroll, the next text, the next night of release. It's not in avoiding pain or numbing silence. The way out of the loop is not forward. It is inward. It's not escape. It's return. Return to what, you ask? To yourself. To the part of you that you exiled when you first believed you were too much, too needy, too soft, too vulnerable. To the part of you that didn't get what it needed and learned to perform instead. The child who wanted to be loved without earning it. The teenager who longed to be seen but got attention instead. The adult who now tries to translate craving into connection but keeps ending up alone. You don't need to shame this part. You need to meet it. This is where real healing begins. When you stop asking how to stop the craving and start asking what it's trying to tell you. When you stop running and start listening, the impulse that feels so uncontrollable is not a curse. It's a compass. It's pointing you to the space in your soul that still feels empty, unheld, unloved. Jung didn't ask people to destroy their instincts. He asked them to understand their symbolic function. Every craving has meaning. Every obsession is a mask for something tender underneath. And when you pull back the mask, you don't find something evil. You find something wounded, something sacred, something still waiting for you. The return doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in the small, ordinary decisions you make every day to stay present with yourself. When the urge rises, and instead of obeying it blindly, you pause. You breathe. You close your eyes and say, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. And even if you end up giving in later, even if you slip, that one pause begins to change something. It begins to rebuild the bridge between your impulse and your awareness. That is the first step of returning. Stay, not with her, not with a fantasy, with yourself. Stay with the ache, stay with the longing, stay with the child inside who still wants to be held. At first, it will feel impossible. Your skin will crawl, your chest will tighten, your thoughts will race. You'll reach for your phone, you'll want out. But if you stay just a little longer than you usually do, something shifts. In the silence, a voice rises. It's quiet, but unmistakable. It says, I miss you. That's it. That's the voice you've been trying to drown out with dopamine and distraction. It doesn't demand anything. It doesn't shame you. It just wants you back. When you begin to answer that voice note, by suppressing desire, but by honoring what lies beneath it, you change the wiring. You move from reaction to relationship. You become someone who doesn't fear their desire because you know what it points to. You can hold it without collapsing into it. You can welcome the heat without losing your clarity. Desire becomes less of a fire consuming you and more of a flame lighting your way home. And what does home look like? It looks like moments of stillness where you no longer feel the need to prove anything. It looks like creating something not to impress but to express. It looks like crying without explanation, laughing without performance, breathing without panic. It looks like waking up and remembering that you are not broken, you are not hollow. You are just disconnected from the parts of you that make life rich and real and worth showing up for. Returning to yourself is not about cutting off lust. It's about tracing it back to its source. And when you do, you find it's not lust at all. It's longing for presence, for purpose, for wholeness. And the moment you recognize that, the grip loosens. You can still feel attraction. You can still enjoy pleasure. But now, it doesn't control you. It flows through you. It teaches you. It connects you. Because you've reclaimed the space that lust once tried to fill. Jung called this integration the sacred work of bringing the unconscious into the light. It's not glamorous. It doesn't happen in a flash of enlightenment. It happens slowly, gently, through staying with what's real. That's the only way out. Return to the ache. Return to the silence. Return to the inner voice that's been whispering your name for years. You were never meant to chase endlessly. You were meant to return to feel, to hold, to live as someone who no longer runs from themselves. The exit was never in the next click, the next night, the next fix. The exit is you, coming home. There's something no one tells you about obsession. It's not always about the person. It's about the way they make you feel. Or more accurately, the way you feel in their presence-free, desired, alive scene. It's not her you're addicted to. It's the temporary homecoming she represents. The feeling of being yourself, even if just for a moment. Because when you're with her, even in thought, fantasy, memory, or projection, something inside you opens. Something breathes. Something says, "There I am." This is what makes it so confusing. You keep telling yourself it's about her. Her voice, her body, her attention. You say she's special, unforgettable, different. But if you strip it down, if you really look, you'll see it's not her you crave. It's who you become in the space she holds. That momentary return to the version of you who feels whole, wanted, alive. That version is always there. But you've forgotten how to access him without someone else. And so you become dependent not on her, but on the mirror she offers. You chase the high of self-recognition through someone else's eyes, through someone else's touch, through someone else's validation, and you call it love. You call it desire. But underneath, it's longing. Longing for your own presence. Longing to meet the part of you you keep outsourcing. Carl Jung warned about this dynamic again and again. When we don't integrate our own soul, we become hungry for reflections of it in others. We become infatuated with people who temporarily reconnect us to parts of ourselves we've lost. That's not intimacy, that's projection. It feels powerful, but it's fragile, because the moment they leave, or stop responding, or disappoint us, we collapse. Not just because we've lost them, but because we've lost access to ourselves again. You're not weak for feeling this. You're not broken because you miss her, but you must understand what's really happening underneath. Every craving, every memory you replay, every time you find yourself searching for her presence, it's not about her. It's your soul reaching for the experience of being whole. That feeling is not an illusion. It's real. But it's not hers to give. It's yours to reclaim. The reason lust and longing feel so overwhelming is because you've come to associate them with someone else giving you permission to be your full self. When she wanted you, you allowed yourself to feel confident. When she touched you, you allowed yourself to feel alive. When she listened, you allowed yourself to feel seen. But those were your feelings. She didn't create them. She simply unlocked the door. And now, you think she holds the key. But the truth is, the key was always inside you. You just forgot how to turn it. This forgetting is what Jung would call the loss of the soul. A disconnection so subtle, so normalized, that you no longer even realize how far you've drifted from your essence. You've become a stranger to your own depth. You've replaced intimacy with stimulation, presence with performance, love with control. And in doing so, you've trained your nervous system to associate self-worth with being wanted. You only feel alive when someone else sees you, and when they don't, you vanish. Numb, hollow, reaching for anything to remind you you're still here. But you are here. Beneath the ache, beneath the craving, beneath the endless mental loops, you are still here. The man who once laughed without trying, the boy who once dreamed without fear, the soul who still longs for something deeper than pleasure. He never left. He's just been waiting for you to stop chasing yourself in someone else's reflection. The answer isn't to repress your desire. It's to understand its function. Desire, when it arises, is pointing you back to the inner flame that's gone dim. It's not asking for someone. It's asking for you, your presence, your attention, your willingness to feel what you've spent years avoiding. When you begin to meet yourself therein, the ache, in the silence, in the trembling, you reclaim the parts of you that once made love sacred. You remember how to feel. Not just lust, but beauty. Not just attraction, but awe. Not just need, but devotion. This is what it means to come home. You start creating again, not to impress, but to remember. You start breathing deeper, not because you're calm, but because you're honest. You start seeing people not as objects to conquer or fix you, but as companions on the same journey of remembering who they are. And then, something remarkable happens. You stop craving the rush. You stop chasing ghosts. You stop needing her to complete you, because you've learned how to stand in your own presence without collapsing. You've built a relationship with yourself that no longer relies on performance or approval. You've become someone who doesn't just look for love, you carry it. In your voice, in your choices, in the way you hold yourself when no one is watching. That's the truth no one teaches you. You were never addicted to her. You were addicted to the feeling of coming alive. And the moment you realize that feeling was yours all along, you're free. Not free from desire, but free from mistaking it as something you must chase outside of yourself. You still feel, you still long, but now, you know what it means. Now, you can hold that longing like an old friend. You can hear its message without needing to act it out. You can sit in the fire without burning down your soul, because you trust it now. You trust yourself. Carl Jung believed that true transformation comes from integration, from reclaiming the parts of us we thought we had to exile in order to be loved. The inner feminine, the emotional self, the creative spirit, the child who still believes in wonder. When you bring those pieces home, desire changes. It no longer hunts in the shadows. It becomes light. It becomes sacred. It becomes you. So the next time you feel that wave rise, pause. Don't shame it. Don't indulge it blindly. Just ask, what part of me is trying to come alive again? And listen, because the man you're looking for, the one who feels, who creates, who loves, who knows his worth, he's not in her eyes. He's not in the next message. He's in you, waiting. You're not addicted to her. You're ready to return to yourself. And that's where real love begins. Not as a performance, not as a chase, but as a reunion with the self you were never meant to abandon.